say Diane? Diane's there. Awesome.
I just let her in. But we're still looking at the screen share here. Hold on a second. I don't see her. I hit admit, so.
Yeah. Yeah, you might strain your necks a little bit. Just looking. Yeah.
Well,
We're recording.
okay. Rock and roll. First thing on the agenda is public comment. Sorry. Any public comment? Is that better?
Oh.
Okay. Awesome. No public comment. We have the meeting minutes that need to be approved from August 25th. Can I get a motion for that?
Do we have enough?
Do we have
people? Yeah.
Three.
Four.
Was-
Oh, three. Sorry.
Guys, who's at the hole beside me? I'm sorry. I thought it was going to be a Zoom call. I didn't realize it was going to be live.
That's okay. You can't catch my cold if you're home.
Happy to hear that.
Yeah. So we need a motion to accept the minutes from 25th of August. Can I get that motion up?
I move to accept the meeting minutes from August 25th.
Can I get a second for that?
I'll second.
Good, Jack, a second. Any objections? We will consider those unanimously approved. So next on the list is our friend Matt. It's all you.
Thanks, Pete. Nice to see everyone. I think I might alter the presentation a little bit just because right now we just have members of the select board and planning commission here. So there may be some things that I go through a little quicker. But we'll just see how it goes. So thanks for coming out this evening. This is the public informational meeting for the Dover zoning bylaw update project. As you all know, I'm Matt Bockler with the Windham Regional Commission. Just to give you an introduction to the project, the town of Dover is working on updating their zoning bylaws coming out of their 2024 Dover Town Plan update project. This was one of the priority projects in the Dover Town Plan from 2024. The town applied for and received a municipal planning grant from the state in March of 2025. And Windham Regional Commission was hired by the town to collaborate with the Planning Commission on this zoning bylaw update project. So we're really just at the beginning of this project. We started working in June, but really started working in more earnest in September. And at this point, we're kind of in the information gathering phase. So this meeting tonight is one opportunity to hear back from members of the public just about their experience with the existing zoning bylaws. We've also been meeting with town committees and meeting with town staff just to get input on the existing bylaws. So to give you an overview just of what we'll cover this evening, for the first part of the presentation, I'm just going to go briefly over some basic information about zoning and what zoning is, and then talk about the project goals. We do have a small group exercise that we can do following that, and then opportunity for feedback and questions following that small group exercise. So people probably have different levels of familiarity with what zoning is. Zoning bylaws are municipal land use regulations that govern development. So all zoning bylaws include a zoning map that's used to create different land use districts across a community. and different types of development are allowed within those land use districts. And the next slide, I'll show you Dover's existing zoning map. But generally, you have areas that are primarily for residential use, commercial use. You might have some areas for industrial use, mixed use areas. The zoning bylaws are drafted by the Planning Commission and then ultimately adopted by the town select board. It's important to note too that in Vermont, municipal zoning bylaws need to comply with certain requirements and state statute. So there are things that you have to have in your zoning. There are also things that you cannot do with your zoning regulations. A lot of those provisions have to do with supporting certain types of housing, making sure towns aren't restricting housing. And then there's also limitations on how much towns can regulate farming and forestry activities. There are a lot more requirements in statute, but those are just some examples. So this is the town's existing zoning map. And I've kind of called out some of the key locations in town. So the village districts cover Westover and Eastover. That's the dark pink color on the map. Along Route 100, the town has a planned commercial district from Westover up to the Mount Snow area. Around Mount Snow, there's a resort zone and vacation zone. So that's primarily associated with the resort and second homes in that area. There are a few little industrial districts. Those are the light gray color, kind of along the Wilmington town line. So that includes the former airport, the wastewater treatment facility, and the transfer station. And then residential districts are shown in the yellowish orange. So that largely corresponds with existing residential subdivisions. These are more kind of moderate density, 1-2 acre lots generally. Productive residential is the darker green color. So this is the more kind of rural parts of town. There's a 5 acre minimum lot size requirement in that area. This is an area too where there are more existing farms present. And then the final one is the Resource Conservation District. So that's the lighter green color. And that includes Green Mountain National Forest land, the town forest land. So town forest is up on the northern part of town and Green Mountain National Forest on the western part of town. So generally, the way the zoning is set up, you have higher intensity uses in the village district, commercial district, and then in the resort district. And then the residential district is kind of moderate intensity development. And then you have lower intensity development and productive residential and resource conservation. So you can see the areas that are meant for kind of the higher intensity uses are relatively small in Dover, mostly around Route 100 and Mount Snow, and then the village of Eastover. So generally, zoning bylaws follow a similar format. So zoning bylaws include standards for each of those different zoning districts. So that includes minimum lot sizes, building setbacks, those types of requirements. Then there are general regulations that will apply to all uses. So those are often things that a use of a property that might impact a neighbor. So it could be exterior lighting or screening or things of that nature. And then zoning bylaws can also include special standards for specific types of uses. So it's common for towns to have additional regulations for like a gas station, for example, or if someone is extracting gravel from a site in town, you want more specific types of standards for that use. And then state statute also has exemptions, as I mentioned, for certain types of uses where the town can't regulate those. So certain farming practices, state and public facilities are exempt from local zoning bylaws. And then administrative procedures. So that's just the steps someone would need to go through to get approval to do something on their property. So that's always included in the zoning. And then finally, there's always a definition section to define all the different terms in the bylaws. So don't try to read this screen. I know it's very small print, but I just wanted to share an excerpt from the Dover zoning bylaws. So this is your existing dimensional standards table. And so this is a standard thing to include in zoning bylaws. And so this is where it breaks down for each of those different zoning districts that we looked at, minimum lot size requirements, building setback requirements, the width and depth of a lot. And so if you were a property owner or a developer looking to do a project in Dover, the first step would be figuring out where your property is on the zoning map and then referring to this table to get a sense of what are the dimensional standards for the property. So just for example, the residential district has a 1 acre minimum lot size. The front yard setback is 100 feet from Route 100 center line and 50 feet from other roads. And then that district has a minimum width of 150 feet and a minimum depth of 150 feet per property. So this is a way to kind of standardize how development happens across town in these different districts.
Did you create that?
That's from the zoning, your existing zoning bylaws. So I didn't put that together. Yeah. So next I wanted to talk about some of the general project goals. So the first one is implementing the objectives and policies from the 2024 town plan. The goal of the town plan is to guide future growth and development in the community and to provide for public services and facilities and protect the environment. So zoning bylaws are one of the main implementation tools that towns have to implement their town plan. And in the next few slides, I'll go over in a little more detail what was included in the 2024 town plan and how that's going to be addressed through this zoning bylaw update project. So this is kind of a natural cycle for towns to go through. Town plans get updated every 8 years. So Dover's was just updated in 2024. And following that, it's a good time for the town to review its zoning bylaws to address changes in the town plan. But then these are some other project goals that it's also good to do at that same time, which Vermont statute is always being updated in terms of what is required for towns to have or to not do in their municipal zoning bylaws. So this is a chance to review changes that have been made to statutes since the bylaws were last updated to make sure that Dover's zoning is up to date with those statute requirements. It's also an opportunity to revise regulations that may be outdated at this point. So zoning bylaws are always being added to and amended over time. And sometimes you have provisions in there that made sense 20 years ago that aren't as needed as today. So it's a chance to take out regulations that aren't needed anymore. Another goal for this project is to improve the usability of the bylaws for Dover residents. So making sure the bylaws are easy to navigate and get through and people can understand what's expected of them and also what the process is for getting approval. And then also to make sure that there are adequate regulations in place, but that the zoning is not over burdensome for residents and property owners. So I know we all went through the town plan update process together, so this data might be familiar to you, but I did want to just provide some of the background data from the town plan that led to some of the recommendations in the town plan and are being considered with the zoning update project. So This slide is showing on the left-hand side Dover median household income from 2011 to 2021. And as you can see, it's been kind of relatively stable up and down a little bit, but generally right around $50,000 per year for median household income over that 10-year period of time. The chart to the right is showing median primary home sale prices. So this is for primary homes, not secondary homes. So Vermont does distinguish between secondary and primary home sale prices. This period of time is a different 10-year period of time from 2015 to 2024. But as you can see, those numbers are going up as compared to median household income, which is staying relatively stable. So from 2015 to 2024, median primary home sales went from about $200,000 a year to close to $500,000 a year in Dover. And so median household income is just not keeping pace with housing costs. So this points to a need for additional housing in town. Another piece of data from the Dover Town Plan was the change in age composition from 2010 to 2020. So the lighter green bar is showing population in 2010, and the darker green bar is showing population in 2020. And this is showing population by different age groupings. And so you can see between 2010 and 2020, there's an increase in the dark green bars towards the right-hand side of the chart. So this is population over the age of 50, has increased significantly but in that 10-year period, especially residents age 60 or older. Dover, we remember talking about this going through the town plan process. Dover also saw a much larger increase in its under 20-year-old population in that period of time too, which when we were doing the town plan update, we talked about how that could be related to the COVID-19 pandemic and a temporary relocation of families to Dover when the 2020 census was conducted that may have picked up a higher number of school-age children that are currently in Dover. But the population is aging, and so there are implications for what type of housing is needed for residents that are growing older and looking to stay in Dover long term. So the town plan included several overarching priorities that were addressed at the beginning of the plan, and I'm highlighting three here that are especially related to the zoning update project. So those were support for preserving and maintaining valuable open spaces, natural resource areas, scenic views, and historic settlement patterns that help define the character of Dover. Recognition that there is a need to provide more housing opportunities in the town, especially for the local workforce, but that development should be directed towards appropriate areas. So that's through your zoning, that's an opportunity to direct that housing to districts in the town where additional housing could be supported. Support for redefining the Route 100 corridor in Westover, including addressing traffic and pedestrian safety and encouraging new development and redevelopment opportunities. So those are three priorities that will be addressed through the zoning updates. And then the town plan also included several action steps more specific to zoning changes. So in the land use chapter, it called for supporting mixed uses in villages in the village districts and updating the zoning to better reflect existing conditions. So existing lot size, setbacks, densities, allowing for a greater variety of housing types and increased density in planned commercial village and resort center districts. So identifying those areas as areas that would be appropriate for more housing. Considering site design and access management on Route 100. So that is primarily your planned commercial district. There has been a fair amount of development along that corridor in the past 40 years or so. And looking at just making sure that as new development or redevelopment occurs, that it's done in a safe manner, given the location along Route 100. Removing barriers for affordable housing, accessory dwellings, and two-family dwellings. So again, this is getting towards that goal of opening up more opportunities for housing in Dover, and then ensuring continued availability of land for forestry and agriculture. For the natural resources chapter, specific action steps included updating the flood hazard regulations and considering river corridor regulations as well. Considering regulations to limit development in areas with steep slopes. There was support for maintaining the minimum lot sizes for resource conservation. So that's 27 acres in resource conservation and the 5-acre minimum lot size for productive residential districts. So I would say one of the general recommendations coming out of the town plan was, Dover has a fair amount of development, especially in West Dover, but there's a lot of Dover that is largely rural, a lot of area that's in conservation, and wanting to protect those areas that have not been developed and do have more of that rural character. So that would be a goal of the zoning bylaw update project too, is to really try to focus development in areas that where it's more appropriate. In the housing chapter, providing more options for housing alternatives, looking at the current requirements in zoning for affordable housing projects. So just making sure the zoning bylaws are supportive of affordable housing. And then finally, in the economic development chapter, there was a specific action step of supporting business growth and development and addressing potential impacts. So that would be another goal of the zoning bylaw update project, is to make sure the zoning is set up to support existing businesses and potential businesses that might want to locate in Dover. And then I did want to highlight a couple of the more significant changes to statute since I think the bylaws were last updated in 2013. Is that right?
2013.
So there have been other updates to statute since then, but there have been 2 pieces of legislation in the last couple years that there's just been more news and reporting about. So the Home Act of 2023, there were many changes in that piece of legislation, but just to highlight, duplexes, so 2-family homes, now have to be allowed in all zoning districts where single-family dwellings are allowed, and they have to be allowed with the same dimensional standards. So, if you allow one single-family home on a 1-acre lot, you also have to allow a 2-family home on a 1-acre lot. Accessory dwelling unit regulations cannot be more restrictive than single-family dwellings. So statute does have a specific definition for accessory dwelling units and a kind of a minimum size that towns need to allow. Towns can allow accessory dwelling units to be larger than that, but they do set a minimum requirement. So this is more there are examples where a town might say an accessory dwelling unit can only be like a studio apartment or a one-bedroom apartment, and you can no longer require that. So you can't set a limit on the number of bedrooms. You can still limit the square footage of an accessory dwelling unit, but you can't limit the number of bedrooms. And then this last one is not applicable for Dover right now, but I do want to mention it too, because I know, areas of Westover are served by municipal wastewater. So one of the changes in the Home Act was any area that's served by municipal wastewater and municipal water needs to allow a minimum density of 5 units per acre. And then multifamily dwellings of up to 4 units have to be a permitted use if that property is served by water and wastewater. And I know Dover is just at the beginning stages of looking at the possibility of municipal water, and that the development of that system would be many years down the road, but this provision is in place in statute now. So if that did come to pass, this would need to be followed. So. And then Act 181, this was in 2024. This included some significant reforms to Act 250, the state land use permitting program, but it did include some changes to municipal bylaw requirements. So there are protections for occupancy by unrelated people. So basically that means you can't limit occupancy to only people that are related to one another, for example, which some bylaws will have that provision. And then there's also new statewide standards for off-street parking. So now statute defines the minimum dimensional standards you have to have. So towns, well, I'm trying to remember, towns can't require a parking space to be more than 9 feet by 18 feet in dimensions, unless it's a accessible space, ADA accessible. So as part of this process, I've been reviewing the existing zoning bylaws and reviewing those in comparison to statute and making notes about changes in the bylaws that are needed based on changes in statute. And then the final 2 project goals that I mentioned at the beginning of revising outdated regulations and making the bylaws more usable, that is something we're going to be working on as we work with the Planning Commission and with Tabby on updating the zoning bylaws. And so part of this phase of the project is gathering information from different members of the community to help us address those issues of things that are outdated and things that are maybe difficult to work with in the existing zoning. So that's what I had for just the background presentation. I do have like a small group exercise that I had planned out, which I guess I'm happy to kind of just take questions, just because we just have members of the Planning Commission Select Board. But I'm happy. Yes, Tabby. Yeah.
Could you just back up one slide?
Yeah.
I'd like you to clarify
Yeah.
for the record what you're
Yeah.
looking at under the Home Act.
Yeah.
Minimum density at 5 acre multi-family dwellings up to 4 units. Now, is that a unit, which is a duplex or multiple, is each dwelling in that considered a unit, or is a building with a multi-family, let's say a duplex or a 3-family, considered a unit?
So it's the unit is the dwelling unit. So a duplex would be 2 units. A structure with 3 separate apartments would be a 3-unit. So there are kind of 2 separate requirements here. The first requirement is a multifamily dwelling. A multifamily dwelling is any building with 3 or more units. So if you're a multifamily dwelling with 3 or 4 units, it has to be a permitted use, not a conditional use, in an area served by water and wastewater. But that would also apply for like a 2-family home or a 1-family home in that same district. the minimum density of 5 units per acre, that applies to any type of housing. So actually, if it's an area served by water and wastewater, you need to make sure that you could allow 5 single-family homes on separate lots at 5 units an acre. So essentially, it's meaning in that area, you have to allow for a 1/5 acre lot size for a single-family home. Is the interpretation from the state at this point. So, yeah, 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 yeah.
That is the requirement if an area is served by municipal sewer and municipal water.
Mhm.
If it is not served,
Yep.
as in our case currently by
Right.
municipal water,
Right.
we could still enact the bylaw to
Mhm.
match this.
Yeah, you could. Yep. Yeah, so it's right, it's you shall do this if you have water and wastewater in place, but it's not saying you shall not do it if you don't have those in place. So you can do it even
For
without it.
instance,
Yeah.
if 1 acre is going to be broken up into the 5 unit,
Hmm.
and you have either tested out or wells
Hmm.
enough to supply appropriate incoming water for those
Right.
units.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Adequate water without it being on a municipal water line.
Yep.
At this point.
Yeah, and that's the just important thing to note with any minimum density standards or maximum density standards is, and this is true with kind of many provisions in your zoning, is there are site conditions too that constrain development. So you might, due to the soils on the site, you might need more property area to fit a septic system in, um, or the water might not be adequate for a level of density that under the zoning, technically you could build at that density, but you don't have enough water, or there's a wetland, or there's a steep slope. And there's a lot of things that the zoning is just setting the standards, but it can't take into account the specific site conditions on every property. And that's why the town has a zoning permit process and a DRB approval process. So, yeah. 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 The statute, it was a complicated piece of legislation, and it's important too to note that changes are made in statute, and even if your zoning is not updated, you still need to follow what the state law is, and it's a challenge for towns because you're having to, like for town zoning administrators, you're having to, rely on your zoning, but also keep in mind these changes in statute that are not in your zoning yet. So, that's right. One of the, big goals of the project is to get the zoning up to date, based on where things are in the statute. Yeah. Yeah, Patrick.
Yeah, I heard this point. There's a lot of tests. Yeah. Two questions. When it says minimum density of 5 units per acre, that's if someone came to Tabby and said they wanted to build within that means that she can't say no. That doesn't mean that if I wanted to roll up and buy that 1 acre and build 1 house, that doesn't mean I can't do that.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Second.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm going to be trying to shave too fine a point here.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to swipe. When we're saying municipal water and sewer,
Yeah.
we actually have 2 different municipalities here, and that the sewer is operated by North Branch Town.
Yeah.
Is that back there? Do you have any familiarity?
I believe they would consider the fire district to, if not necessarily be a municipality, it would still meet that. So, it would still trigger that. I don't know, there's a gray area because, for example, I know Dover has a lot of, I might not be getting the term right, but you have like condominiums that share a water source. And so it's a public water source. So does that, I don't believe that triggers it. So that, yeah.
I kind
Okay,
of
yeah,
nail down that definition of what is
yeah,
public water source versus municipal water source,
Yeah.
et cetera. So
yeah,
it doesn't, a public water source does not need a municipal water source because it
Yeah.
is still coming from a well system that is managed to serve
Yeah.
a certain number of dwellings,
hmm
but it is not a service
Yeah.
or a utility
Yeah.
that is provided the way
hmm
you could consider the sewer system a utility.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. I was hoping that was the case. Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, a public water system, let's say a collection of wells that serves the condominium complex, does not count as a municipal water system.
Like that, but if they're incorporated into the municipal water system, so.
I don't know the
Yeah.
answer to that. If the municipal water system then takes,
Mhm.
this is not the right word, but ownership of multiple public water systems as
Yeah.
part of that infrastructure. I don't know how that would fit within this because
Yeah.
my understanding of the public water systems that serve, let's say, a condominium complex that is sized for that condominium or that group of dwellings.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how that sizing and gallonage
hmm
would then be incorporated into
Yeah.
the municipal system. I'm just not
Yeah.
sure of the engineering on that or how that would meet
Yeah.
the statute.
Yeah.
Well,
And-
let's look at it from a practical standpoint. I think if the town is building something for water, this is water. If the town is not building them, it's not.
Right.
hmm
And the town, if we're looking at a municipal system like North Branch, that is a separate municipality and is not handled by the town at all. It's a completely separate system with its own separate taxes, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah.
how a municipal water system would be handled or managed,
hmm
would that be part of North Branch? Would it be
Yeah.
a separate infrastructure? I don't have
Yeah.
a clue as to the answer to that at
Yeah.
the moment.
And
That's where the committee would be going.
yeah, and I know the statute, the Home Act does, it does include a provision that acknowledges, just because a town has municipal water and wastewater, you might not be able to connect a 5-unit dwelling because there's not adequate capacity. So again, if there's not adequate capacity in the wastewater system or there's not adequate water to serve that, the town isn't required to issue a permit if they can't actually provide the service. So, and so I think it's, and thinking about the town, existing condominium associations, like they might already be at capacity. I don't know, but so even if the town took it over, there might not be additional water that could support more density. So
System. Already have that density out and.
yeah, right.
Single buildings.
Yeah. Yeah, because 5 units an acre it's not that dense. Yeah. I just I come from working in much areas with much more density. So yeah.
Condo associations
Yeah.
are PUDs,
hmm
which
Yeah.
makes them to cluster.
Yeah.
So say an association has
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
So.
Hmm. Yeah. Hmm.
Place, but
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
they could have 200,
Yeah.
right? Because there's
Mhm.
5 per acre.
Hmm.
So they could now have 250 units on that same 50-acre parcel.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then cluster,
Yeah.
because there is a certain requirement about keeping open space,
Right.
right? So they would be,
Yeah.
towers. There's-
Yeah. That's where I can see it getting kind of complicated. Yeah. Well, yeah. And I don't have an answer of kind of what that would look like.
Sorry,
It's just
Um,
I just don't have an answer of what that would look like in that specific situation. Yeah.
Okay, that's a question.
I think that was, if I may, I think that was Sarah. Um, I live in one of those, and I was on the board for a number of years. And the one thing that I would say is that the unpredictability of the bylaws for each of the condos. For example, according to a very weird bylaw, Green Spring is actually a PUD, not an HOA. And there are others that go on with seasons, and there's 1,000 homes just between Seasons, Timber Creek, and Green Spring. And because of variance in bylaws in each one of them, how that water would be adapted and permitted might be completely different than anything the town is thinking. So I just think that maybe more so than other towns, because of the high number of second homeowners in a condo situation, we might have a little bit more unpredictability than was anticipated in a town without that kind of a setup. Just a thought.
well, here's the other thing.
Yeah.
If the state says
Yeah.
that has to happen,
Yeah.
can that supersede
Yeah.
articles of incorporation and bylaws for an association?
Yeah. Because I would
Not as a
think like,
general rule. We can only be
yeah.
stricter. As I understand it, we can't overrule you, but we can be stricter. And how each one chooses to do their voting really is where the issue comes down to whether or not they want to adapt
Here's my thinking.
or adopt.
If
I'm
the
sorry.
state is doing this because they're trying to increase housing, are they going to make it a rule that associations cannot limit them from achieving the goal of the housing they're seeking? Is the state going to step in and say, we're making this is going to be a harsher, you're not going to get to limit me. You're not going to get to do NIMBY.
And I would just
I mean,
say
Sarah,
I
I
don't
think
have
it's a
any.
great question.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have a clear answer to it. It does definitely become more of like a legal issue, but I do think like usually with a condominium, with like a PUD situation, um, usually that communal land is somehow equally shared amongst the property owners. So then it's a question of like if you're gonna be using up additional land, then like everyone has a stake in that. So I think like the property ownership issue, I think might make it very difficult to
Well, but
increase density.
the developer,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
If they have percent,
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
have 20 acres of open space, we want to reduce that to 10 acres of open space and put
Mhm.
50.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
can we,
Yeah.
at the state, may say that's exactly what we want.
Yeah.
I think that looking at that kind of a scenario or that kind
Yeah.
of situation, it may need to go back to how the Act 250 for that was written,
Mhm.
what type of
Yeah.
restrictions, any on
Yeah. Yeah.
what is there. If
Hmm.
additional permitting might or might not be able to be amended. I can see how a developer might want to say, hey, I want to put 10 more homes and use 2 acres, but with the land use regulation and with changes that have been going on and updating in Act 250 and all of that, instead of tier 1A, 1B, there's a whole lot of other
But
stuff.
here's the thing,
So
the state is fighting itself, right? Because it's creating
Yeah.
Act 250 requirements and restrictions and saying we need more housing.
Right.
So make
Yeah.
up your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
So
would send everybody, both on the select board and on the planning commission, the sets of slides from the planning and zoning and the links, the recordings of the planning and zoning meeting that happened this past Wednesday with a little bit better explanation of what's going on in tier 1A, 1B, and some of the Act 250, which still is kind of the state fighting with itself on some of this, but at least it's a little bit better explanation of some of the stuff that's gone on with coming out of the Act 250 and now the land use review board, etc. And I will distribute all of that to everyone.
And
just for your
Windham Regional we're in the process of updating our regional plan that was just adopted in July to meet the new Act 181 requirements. And so part of that is there's new statewide regional future land use mapping that our regional planning commission has to do, and that ties into eligibility for some of the Act 250 exemptions. And so we're going kind of section by section across the region. So we haven't mapped over yet, but it'll be in the next 1 to 3 months that we'll be coming to meet with planning commission and select board about that and just the implications. Yeah.
So all of this is going to be in flux.
Yeah. But and we have to, but for Dover right now, and then one thing we're looking at with the update project is including subdivision bylaws, because the town does not have subdivision bylaws. I think it's good practice to have those, at least basic subdivision bylaws. And right now, Dover's not eligible for Act 250 exemptions because it does not have subdivision bylaws. So if you have those in place, the town could, and it's up to the town if they want Act 250 exemptions for certain areas of town. But without subdivision bylaws, you're not able to do that right now. You're not required to. Yeah, that's an option. So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And where it's not.
Yeah. It's not required. So, it's opt in. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah. Thank you all.
I'm sorry that you just keep moving forward.
Yeah, and I think, this is really just meant as a kind of letting people know this project is beginning, and we'll be having more public meetings once we get more into the drafting and revisions and have things to share with folks. So
This recording will be posted, so people who
Right.
weren't aware or
Yeah.
be able to pick this up, listen to it, and then come to us. Whatever that we may be able.
Sorry, but you know the questions are all going to come up. Things are going to
That's not, it's not the most exciting topic. Zoning.
Matt, I know you're trying to be 45 minutes back, but
That would be fine. It's been a long day for me already, so yeah.
talking about
Yeah.
updating, that's going to happen. We're going to have that conversation at a future date, like reading conversation.
Oh, I'm sorry, but the email you sent me about the DRB comments, yes. So my next step is to compile feedback that I've gotten from DRB and from Conservation Commission, meeting with Tabby, and I'm sorry, is it Shannon, Economic Development Director? Or I met with Shannon too. So I'm gonna just compile all that and provide that summary to the Planning Commission. I think your next meeting is November 10th. Does that sounds right? So, but yeah, the next step is to start actually making the changes. Now I have a good sense of like the full picture of the work that needs to be done. So.
Does the state set its latitude in terms of rewriting part of the PUD amendment process?
Yeah, I think we can definitely do that. Yeah, I think that that should be relatively straightforward, just to kind of maybe define what would qualify as a minor amendment, and then just create a process for that. And yeah,
Exactly
yeah,
what we need.
yeah,
PUD Green Springs is a lot of getting decks repaired. And
Yeah.
that requires that full PUD amendment.
Yeah.
For them to get a 3-foot larger deck. And, or to build a lower deck underneath the existing deck. And it seems like a ridiculous amount of work
Mhm.
for such a small thing. And
Yeah.
so if, I
Yeah.
was just worried that the state was gonna have like, this is how it has to be done. And
No.
our hands would be.
No, the state, I mean, there's like in statute, I don't even know if it's required, but they encourage towns to include provisions for planned unit developments. But I mean, my guess is they would be happy if you allow for a minor amendment process. I mean, I think it's just, it's just helping facilitate development. So, yeah,
Additional.
yeah,
I think we should probably be addressing as we get further
Yeah.
down this is, the variance
Yes.
structure is very tight, very restrictive
Mhm.
by statute, but also that makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense. But then there's a question, I think we talked about it briefly, about what is a waiver.
Yeah.
For,
Yeah.
Well,
a
I had a conversation with him, and he said, just don't make your systems as restrictive in the beginning, and then they don't need to have variances to get what they want. Like, the only reason you need a variance is
Yeah.
because people can't meet the standard of the zoning for that area.
Yeah.
So change the zoning so that variances aren't as necessary. And
Yeah.
still keep a variance option, and still keep it strict for
Yeah.
really oddball situations. But we don't have to
Mhm.
make variances weaker to make things have more latitude. We can make
Yeah.
things have more latitude.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful, like if a town, and I recognize it's very difficult to get a variance, so people might not even bother to apply for one, but if you're seeing, oh, we're getting lots of variance applications for this one thing again and again, that probably means you need to change your zoning first. So yeah, yeah,
And I think I can count on one hand the number of variances there.
yeah, and it's
Because the zoning changed after the
Hmm.
could no longer
Yeah.
need it with the new zone. So
Yeah.
they got a variance.
yeah,
But a lot of them, they wanted variance to move their snowmobile shed 1 foot off of their property line because it would be ugly if they put it somewhere else.
yeah,
It's like, that's not a good enough reason,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
If that was the only flat part of your land,
hmm
then that's a different.
yeah.
But
Yeah, and so waiver, yeah, because right, state statute has very strict criteria for variance, and there's nothing that can be done about that because it's in statute. But towns can adopt a waiver, a process to grant a waiver for dimensional standards, so just for things like setbacks.
that's where I was going
And
to
you,
go. That's on underside
Yeah.
lots. To have that for lots of 1 acre or less.
But then you've got,
Yeah.
because if you
Yeah.
have somebody who waivers or whatever, a foot off the
Mhm.
property line, that next door neighbor has something
Well,
a foot off the property.
yeah, and I think the towns I know that have a waiver process, towns can still develop their own criteria for granting a waiver, and I think it's a good idea if you want to allow for waivers is still have strict criteria, not as strict as a variance, but still make it, you don't want to make it easy for someone, because then everyone's going to be requesting a variance, but yeah, yeah. Mhm.
That
Yeah.
other towns waiver process.
Yeah.
Better understanding what
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
is out there, because you
Yeah.
don't want to create something that's then too loose.
Yeah,
And we wind up with sheds, things.
right.
You know,
Yeah.
6 inches on the property.
Yeah, and there's also things you can do. Like some towns will say we'll grant you a variance, but we'll like set a limit for how much of a waiver we'll grant. So like we'll grant a waiver, but still you can't be closer than 5 feet to a property line, no matter what. So there's things like that, but we can definitely give examples.
Some verbiage in that, in adjusting on undersized lots, and there's a percentage.
Hmm.
But whether or not. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and does
Yeah.
that verbiage fall within that same waiver concept?
Yeah.
And I'd like
Yeah.
to be able to take a look at that,
Mhm.
just to have a better understanding, you know, as I said, of what constitutes a waiver in
Yeah.
other towns, and whether or not that might work for us or not.
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else? Can I get a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So.
Can I get a second?
I second the motion.
Any objections?
We actually don't have to vote on the
Oh,
adjournment.
good. Perfect.
Just
I
a
like
motion,
that.
second.
I like that anyway.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.